Welcome to today's episode of the Cross Labs podcast, On My Mind.
All the discussions that we have are on the ethics of stable diffusion and the damage that the artists are perceiving out of stable diffusion, all this stuff. But then we also have, like, if I ask you to make the painting of my grandma, you remember like how tricky it was to get stable diffusion to do something that resembled that? Basically, there is a lot of parts of the world that are out of the distribution of the models. And I'm pretty sure like LLMs, if I try to make them to speak in a dialect that is similar to the one we use in Cartagena, it wouldn't struggle. But it would be way easier, because I know it will do it, to pick a dialect from a mountainous place here in Japan. So like, we're basically isolating places that are already physically isolated for whatever struggles they have in their infrastructure. But I feel like AI is not helping, if anything, making it worse.
You have to let me pick apart that because there's like 2 or 3 separate claims in there. The specific example, when I made that picture for you, I actually remember it that you were shocked how much it seemed like it actually did have some idea of things that looked familiar to you. I had no reference pictures of your grandmother and you were still satisfied with the result. So I'm shocked that it worked, but it did actually work. So like that perception of, oh yeah, it only knows the stuff that's in the major areas of the world. I think at least that's not factually accurate. There are certainly biases, but I think that's not a representation of the actual bias, because historically there's all this thing where things that are considered exotic to the major imperial forces of the world ended up getting overrepresented. So you have the sort of like in the US, there was a obsession with Japanese culture. There's sort of Orientalism and exoticizing things from the Orient. You have all of this stuff, and so you have an overrepresentation, kind of exaggerated examples in what do people take photos of. I'm not going to take photos of the random like highway near where I live because it's boring. It's a highway. Like, to me, that's not interesting. It might be very interesting to someone somewhere else. But if I go to Costa Rica, I'm absolutely going to take photos of everything because that's unusual for me. That's not my experience, and so I'll overrepresent it. So just on the basis of the bias, there certainly is a bias, but I'd be cautious of assuming you know what that bias is, or assuming that that bias matches the kinds of prejudice that people actually have when, say, thinking about places. As far as like whether AI is making it better or worse, well, the problem is that in the end, if you have internet, you have a superpower that if you don't have internet, you don't have. Technology in general creates power, and it creates the ability of people to gain benefit. And if you don't have access to the technology, you don't gain the benefit. The thing that's important is to gain access to the technology, I think, rather than be like, all right, this technology gives a benefit, but not everyone immediately gets the benefit. How do we change it? Well, the thing is, if you have a new thing, that new thing has to propagate through the world. You can't have it unless you have it. Is kind of what it comes down to. So that's why I say, like, get internet to places, get people laptops, get people GPUs, rather than worry about, oh, well, like there's some advantage here.
When we're talking about some culture about that, there are things that they are isolated, but not necessarily this is something bad. Taking in account my experience here, how I see the thing, for example, in South America and Colombia in particular, there are so many other necessities, maybe on top of internet or high-performance computer or AI. But again, this is not the whole country. For example, right now we are working at the university in Cartagena on making models of stable diffusion using quantum computing. But this is not the same for the Amazonia or other far places in Colombia. So the thing that maybe we have some isolated cultures or isolated towns doesn't mean that they are poor or they don't want to be, or they are on risk to get behind. We need to make clear where it's necessary to put internet, computers, power in general, and where it is not needed. So when we make clear where is possible, where it's needed, and where it's wanted, then we can start thinking about, okay, how we can accomplish something like, okay, they need it and they want it, so how we can tackle that problem. But in some cases, we don't think that, this is something that is for mankind, but we don't need to force everyone to have one. So just try to make a little clear on that. But once we make clear what is our target or what is the objective, I am pretty sure we can get solutions based on what we want to accomplish. But we cannot start telling or saying that because we are in South America or we are in like a third world part, we need something, or we miss something, or we lack of something. Maybe we are finding that. But we need to think about where it's needed and what can do for bring that kind of power or that kind of technology that to that community. Or we need to be given.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if I think after that statement, there must be a bunch of places where even if I had the chance to have, I don't know, my supercomputer and my whatever, the goals that I'm optimizing my life for have nothing to do with it. And the society is built on something that is not optimized for it anyway. So great to have the hyper GPU and the internet, but I'll use it for something else if I use it at all. Maybe that's also the case.
Well, I mean, a lot of this comes down to who has agency here, right? So I think it is important to be clear. Like, if you say, I want this and I can't have it because of some external thing, then it can be the responsibility of something outside of you to resolve that situation or to help you resolve that situation. If you say, I could have this, but I don't want it, then you're taking responsibility for the outcome. So if you say, like, I really don't want to deal with the internet or computers or electricity even, I want to farm and I want to live a simple life. That is your choice. But if you make that choice, you then kind of don't have the right anymore to complain that like other people are managing to undersell you on food because they're using some automated hydroponic farming where that doesn't require them to actually use soil anymore or something like that. It's like once you've decided this is what I don't want, even though you had the option, then I think at that point there isn't that external responsibility to make sure that you gain the same benefits from that technology as everyone else does. The responsibility is to give you the choice.
Yeah, I would say that's how I lean when I think about these things is I think it's important to empower people with choices and to say, here's all the options that are available, and we want you to have all of the options in case you want to. But ultimately, the choice is up to individuals or societies or whatever. I definitely don't think it's something that's like, okay, no, they're missing out. We have to go make them do this thing. I think that's a really bad approach. But I like this idea of empowerment and providing information that's needed and the means that would allow people to enact on any decisions that they want to make in terms of how they want to be involved in emerging technologies or technologies that are out there. Luke says it's democratizing the access rather than leaving it in the hands of a few. Yep, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think the definition of what counts as democratizing was one of the points of contention about the workshop question, because one view of democratizing is that everyone has access if they want it, and if they don't want it, they kind of also abdicate the ability to say anything about it, right? If you don't get involved in AI, you don't get to decide what AI is or isn't. But then the desiderata from the person who asked that question was that democratization meant that anyone could say, no, you don't make that AI. Like, I don't want to get involved in AI, but I don't want you to do stable diffusion. I don't want AI art to be a thing. I don't want my data to be collected and used by companies to sell me stuff. And there was the observation that the general structure of AI scaling towards big business means that people who actively want to not have certain things come into being given a vote on whether or not they come into being. That was the discussion. I fall on a certain side of that line, which is, I think, as I said, that if you aren't involved, you do kind of abdicate some ability to ask for things, except in the cases in which those directly impinge on your life. If you cut yourself off from the internet and you don't use Facebook, I wouldn't give much credence to someone complaining about Facebook who isn't in a situation where, say, their entire community uses Facebook and is chilling them out or something like that because they're not getting involved, which is actually my case. I don't use Facebook, and everyone around here only organizes things on Facebook. But like, in order for me to consider myself to have a say in that, I would have to actually get involved and actively try to engage with the other people and say, no, don't use Facebook. Use this thing that I'm going to make. I will help us move away from it. Just kind of sitting back and saying, well, I should have a vote. I should be able to say, no one gets to use Facebook because I don't like Facebook. I can't align with that.
That's it for this week's episode of the Cross Labs podcast On My Mind. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll be the first to know when the next episode is out. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.